All right. Hello, Fortinos, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Ministry Revealed. It is November 6th, 2024, and we are still here. Can you believe it? I can't. Everything is still going forward. We are still inching closer and closer every day. We know what the truth is. We have the revelation as never before. We know and understand that pre, mid, and post are all true, and we know that it plays out over a period of above and 14 years. These are undeniable, unequivocal, proven revelations in Scripture. For those who are new and haven't heard this before, what's he talking about? That it's all true and that it's 14 years and above. Well, what you're going to want to do is you can go to ministryrevealed.com and click on the link from the menu called Intro Series. In that, you'll see the same videos, the same first 4 videos as you will in this one here from the playlist. You're going to see a 22-minute intro that will give you a brief overview of the next 3 videos that will follow. You're going to see the second video is a 30-minute Bible study of the differences in the Gospels. And that these differences in the Gospels that we call who the Gospels are speaking to, you're going to see that the end of days, the Scriptures tell us Matthew, Mark, and Luke in the Synoptic Gospels, but in the end of days, the revelation is Luke, Mark, and Matthew. The first will be last, the last will be first. And within it, the differences, what people call discrepancies within the Synoptic Gospels, are all 100% prophetic, and we could prove it. And what they reveal is Luke is pre-trib, Mark is mid-trib, and Matthew's portion is post-trib. You're going to see that Luke's is the pre-trib bride of Christ in a gorgeous white robe. Mark's is the mid-trib in the 7th year of tribulation, in the 7th year of seals. It is the great multitude rapture. That is the world of church that's not prepared, that's asleep. They're going to miss the pre-trib. They weren't in Christ spirit-filled. They maybe believed in him, but were too caught up in the things of this world. They're going to remain during the tribulation of seals. And if they don't turn from him, they will remain with him even if they die during seals, and theirs is paradise. The first group goes to the third heaven. The second group goes to paradise, which is, again, the world, which is the house of Israel, the Gentiles grafted in with the house of Israel. And they're going to go to paradise in the mid-trib great multitude rapture, and the post-trib is Matthew. Matthew is the post-trib at the return of the Lord, feet down, where he will then establish his millennial reign, and they will enjoy the kingdom. Theirs is the city. So it sounds crazy, especially when if you're just new to this and you're suddenly hearing this. I promise you, just come and start with the first 4 teachings here. The third video is going to reveal to you that the end of days isn't a period of 7 years, but a period called above and then 14 years. And you're going to see the above relates to Luke. The 14 years is 7 of seals that relates to Mark, and 7 of trumpets that relates to Matthew. It's revealed in the discourses. It's revealed throughout the epistles. It's revealed in the creation stories themselves. It's everywhere, and we have proven it. It's not maybe, it's not kind of, it's 100% in Scripture revealed, and we've even shown it in many, many different apocryphas. It's incredible. And then you're going to get to the fourth one. And the fourth one is about 2 hours and 45 minutes. And that one's a big one because it will help you understand why everybody has believed in a 7-year tribulation. Why they argue that pre, mid, or post, which one is true. The reason they argue, and the reason for this, is because everybody has foundationally been taught from the Gospel of Matthew, and they didn't even realize what it did. By learning from Matthew as your foundation of Scripture, everything you see is only 7 years. And that's why people think the tribulation is only 7 years long and can't really understand the truth. The 14 years had never ever been revealed. It had never been detailed as we've done it here, because the Gospels had not been yet revealed in who they're speaking to. When you listen to that fourth teaching, your mind will be blown throughout the whole thing, because you will understand, because everybody's foundation has been in the Gospel of Matthew for hundreds of years. When we look to the rest of Scripture, we're looking through the eyes of Matthew's Gospel. Well, if you're new, all of that is about to change because you're going to see it through the eyes of Luke, Mark, and Matthew and understand prophecy as you never have before. So if you're new, you're free to watch this, but I would highly, highly recommend you go and start there. It'll be worth every moment of your time. All right? So with that, brothers and sisters, well, Trump wins. You know, I wouldn't have thought in 100 years, let's say 1,000,000 years, I would not have thought we would have gotten to this point again. I like many of you, I didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming forever. And yet here we are. And, you know, it's really interesting because I think what we're going to have to do next, in fact, I know what we're going to have to do next after this teaching, is I had people ask me about the Cyrus videos I had done in the past. And so I started considering it, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to do a really deep dive and go into the prophetic discussion that we showed in relation to Cyrus that we talked about over the years. But when Trump was then out of office, I set it aside, obviously, and I never ever thought that there would be this possibility of him coming back if he is this potential Cyrus, as it was so touted to be in his first term. So we're going to get to that in the next teaching. And because we have learned so much more than we knew in the past, we're going to be able to go deeper in and show connections and understanding as we've never done before. It was so powerful tonight, that I had planned for this video. I'd been working on this video, putting this one together. And tonight, I was inside grabbing dinner. My son and my wife were there. And I started talking about what I was going to be talking about. And then we were talking about, of course, this stuff with Trump. It was on the news, of course, still. And we were talking about it. And I started talking about the Cyrus connection from years ago and you know, some of my thoughts on it with all of the teachings that we had done years ago about this. And in that moment, I had one of those aha moments, brothers and sisters. It was so big. I was talking, I was explaining some things, and then I stopped and I went, wait a second. And my son he was startled, and he looked at me. I said, hold on a second, guys. Let me go see if I remember what I have understood, because something just came like a lightning flash to my thoughts, and I went, and there it was. There it was. And I skipped the first part of the verse, and I read the second half of this verse and the verse after it, and then I said, now are you ready? And I was telling my wife and my son, I said, now are you ready? Now, based on what I told you, what we were just talking about, listen to the first part of this verse. And my son looks at me and I'm like, did you catch it? He's like, yeah, it said this. And I said, it sure did, didn't it? He was like, whoa. He says, I've never experienced you having one of those moments. He's known that I've had moments like that, you know, the shower moments, these light bulb moments that suddenly just, boom, come right to my thoughts. And that was the first time he experienced it being in the room. So it was wild, and it was a big one. So we're not going to get into it today. As you noticed, I'm skirting around what it was. And there is a big reason for that. But we're going to talk about that most likely, probably, highly likely, God willing, in the next teaching. And it'll be a full breakdown of these teachings we had done years ago. And we're going to show all of these connections. And you're going to recognize them. If you're newer and you hadn't seen those teachings, you will still recognize the teachings because it's all connected to these things we've been talking about for years, even since then. But now, the player might be back in the picture again. And if he is, hold on tight. Hold on tight. But we'll get to that in the next teaching. And because, one of the things is right now is we don't know if he is the Cyrus or not, right? He may be. There was a ton of prophetic implication to the first time he was in power, but there's still a lot of time between now and January 20th at his inauguration. And, with Russia and Iran and China and the World Economic Forum and it might be a tough go for him to get there. But it's all in God's hands, right? It's all in God's hands. And it's not that Trump is a bad guy like some think, or Trump is a good guy like others think. It's that the Father puts the people in these places of power. It is the Lord's will. And Cyrus was no different. He wasn't an enemy to the Jews, right? And Trump isn't an enemy to the Jews. So we'll see what happens between now and then, knowing how much the enemies really don't want him to be in power. And if we make it to January 20th, well, you'll understand what we can be looking for next. And we'll talk about that in the next teaching. But what we're going to do tonight is, in this period between now and then, between now and the inauguration, and maybe a little bit further, we're going to spend some time tonight looking at the potential possibilities between now and a little bit past the inauguration. And as much as you guys know, I do not like chasing the day. You guys know it. We've been given so much revelation. We've understood so much as it has never been revealed before that it really bothers me to be chasing it. And you also know that there's only one reason why I'm chasing it. And that reason, well, actually, tonight we're going to talk about the other one. It's not so much just about the 70. It seems we're already past the 70. I mean, we're in November, for crying out loud. But you're going to see as we talk about this, these potentials that we can keep an eye on and remain hopeful and watch as we continue to go forward. And once this has been put out, we've got now specific times that we can look to and we can be hopeful for. And in between all of them, we can get back to focusing on more revelation, on going into deeper studies and see how many more mysteries the Lord has for us. I'm really hoping the whole Babylon connection, the mystery Babylon, it would be great to have that piece of understanding. But you guys will see when I get into this why and how these watches can still be watches. And in the next one, you'll also understand why it could be even a little bit longer. And it's not because of something, suddenly there's something else. No, it would be the exact same thing, the exact same conversation, and something that we taught on that our brother Jake had shared with me probably over a year, 2 years ago now, maybe a couple years ago now, and we touched on it briefly. That may be one of the pieces that can cause it to go further. Because if you consider where we are already, it's already gone further. It's already past the fall feast times. So even the count with the above and doing the 2 months off, we may not be at Tishri 1 according to the 2 months off. However, we've taught what how the scenario plays out perfectly in relation to Scripture, or what I believe plays out perfectly in the Scripture. But I don't want to confuse that right now because I'm going to save that for the next one. But these watches that we're going to get into tonight, that will take us through for the next little bit so that we can focus on the rest of the stories, on the rest of the revelation of our Lord, the mysteries of his revelation. That will give us time to focus on those things as we go forward. And what you're going to see tonight is going to become obvious in that how on earth could this still be possible looking at what we're looking at now? How is it possible if Jesus' birth is the 3rd month, 15th day. That's definitely the head scratcher. Okay? How could this be possible? And everything that we did and all of this count. I mean, I said in the last one, it's over for me in relation to how far this could have gone. And I still feel like that. But I'm still hopeful. And in this hope, as I kept digging, I saw things that, hold on a second, maybe there's another way to look at this, but with the exact same count that we've been speaking about. Okay? Nothing new in the sense of how the count could play out, but just in when the count would play out. And so that's what we're going to get into. You have to remember, guys, what we've been given to understand, the revelation that we've been given. You see, it's not about, oh, is the revelation going to be correct? We've been able to prove it from the beginning of creation to the end of Revelation. So the question isn't, is it going to be understood when it starts? No, the question is, when? When is it going to start? That's the question, right? And that's what we're trying to discern. And maybe, just maybe, it's somewhere in what we're about to talk about. And if it isn't, we absolutely, unequivocally still have a lot of hope for what's coming next and what I will get into in the next teaching. Okay? So please remember, don't just throw out the baby with the bathwater. Remember what you've understood. Remember the revelations. We will continue to bring about more and connect more. But don't throw it all out because a time has come and gone. We're just trying to discern where the revelation of what we have understood is coming, where it will begin. But it doesn't mean we throw out what we've learned because we've missed where something might begin. All right? So what do we say? It's like a lot of people might say, live like it could be tomorrow, but expect it could be maybe 1 more year or 40 years. Not because I believe it's going to be 40 more years, but you get the point. And you'll understand why I used 40 years in what I'm going to be talking about here tonight as well in one piece. All right? So all of this, again, is to give us some hope, to get us ready, to keep our eyes forward. Okay? To keep our eyes forward and keep going step by step, seeking and searching, being diligent, watching and praying, being repentant, and doing what we need to get done until that time comes. All right? So you're going to notice, as we've spoken about before, there's more than one beginning of a year, right? There's 4, but there are really 2 main beginnings of a year. One is to the house of Israel, and one is to the house of Judah. And I'm sure some of you guys are already starting to clue in where some of this might be going. Okay? It's the same story, but is the start from the summer solstice, or is there a count that should be from the winter solstice? All right? So that's what we're going to get into. That's what we're going to start going into and bring all of these pieces and see where these possibilities still may be. Now, as we get into it, I don't want to give away too much of what I'm going to be sharing in an upcoming one, but I want you guys to also remember that I do absolutely unequivocally believe there was a reason why Taurus was given as the revelation of the beginning. All right? But I'm still hopeful that there's this connection that we've been seeking that could still be at hand, and that maybe Taurus is somewhat of a connection to something else, maybe more personal. And do I fully believe that? No, I'm more probable that it connects to the beginning. However, we will see, we will keep our eyes peeled, we will watch and pray, and we will see if this period of time that we're in now could also make sense. Okay? So, as you know, 70 years, wherever this 70 is, it already seems like it's past, but as I said, from the things shared from our brother Jake a while ago, there is the possibility of it going, that we're already in it, right? That it would have started around Tishri time and go to next year Tishri. There is that possibility, but we'll talk about that in the next one. The other thing that's a big deal is, of course, the Jubilee. All right? It is all about the Jubilee as well. The Jubilee is an absolute key that we've been given to understand. The question is, how is it being counted? And we're going to touch on that briefly, which is why I spoke about, whether it's 1 year or 40 years, we will be ready always. I was telling my wife tonight, too, that one of the big things is when I have something to look forward to, being so distraught and just being in a back and forth ping pong in my mind saying, Lord, we've understood all of these things. What could we have possibly missed about 70th year? What about the Jubilee in the 70th year? I mean, these counts, how is this possible? What is going on? And, it's this battle because it's always been about the year. That's always been the craziest part. What about the year? And there could be an explanation for the additional year, and we'll see how that plays out in the next one. But sorry, I don't want to keep rambling, but I just want you guys to know that we're close, and that the ability to have something to look forward to as watchmen really helps, for the most part, set some things at ease so that we can take a deep breath along the way and spend our time in the rest of Scripture really digging into his mysteries. Okay? And that's really the biggest part, at least for me, because it's the mystery of the revelation that has been the greatest joy, not discerning and trying to figure out the actual day. Like we always say, that's simply the cherry on top. But we won't know that it's the cherry on top until the moment it happens, which means all of the rest is the joy and is the part that we savor and take in, and that's the part that we want. The cherry on top is just a little bit at the end. Okay? Even though it's exciting, it's just the piece at the end. So let's keep that in remembrance, okay? So let's get going here. In Jubilee. Actually, you know what? Before I get going, I want you guys to also remember the ministry, and remember not just the ministry here, but the ministry in Uganda. It has been a quiet month, and that happens when a big watch is coming up, and when also this time of year. And I've said it just recently as well. There has been some support from people that do regularly send in, but it has been much more quiet, and it's kind of put a big struggle and a burden in Uganda. And Uganda right now, the big thing that they're trying to save up for is, I think it's November 22nd, they're doing another one of their big annual outreaches. And so the money that's needed over there is, I think, 4,000 to 5,000 US is what we need to be able to get to Uganda within the next week or two. What is that? 22nd? Yeah, within the next couple weeks. So if anybody has the ability, it would be great. One person could do it, or many people can do it. The ministry is always in need of the support, and especially in its support of Uganda. So please, if you can, if you're able, you can always PayPal us. As you guys know, you can PayPal from links under the video, or you can click right here and the PayPal link will show up, or we've got it on our website as well, and we've got our address in the description box under videos and on the website as well. So with that, I really wanted to make sure to put that out, because this is a big deal, and if they come up short, it's going to be chaotic for all the thousands of people that are going to be showing up. All right? Got to remember, it's Scripture first. They preach and teach salvation first. They do it with the Bibles. Of course, they do it with Cindy's testimony, and then they prepare them and they teach them the understanding of the Gospels and prepare them for the season and time that we're in with the Ministry Revealed book. All right, the revelation of the Gospels and the years and preparing them for all that. So if you can, keep them in mind, keep us in mind, and it would be greatly appreciated. So with that, let's get this party started. So here's where we're going to start. The Jubilee. Fitting because I think it'll be the Jubilee key is what the title of this might be. So we remember here from the Jubilee, right? Here's the question. It says, "And thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years, and the space of 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month on the day of atonement. And you shall hallow the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto the inhabitants, unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and you shall return every man unto his possession, and you shall return every man unto his family." Okay? We know what this talks about. We've shared on this many times. Let's go see this connection. What is this count prophetically in relation to the Jubilee? Well, the Jubilee is like the 8th day. Okay? When it comes to the feasts of the Lord, there are 3 main feasts. As we all know, there are 3 main feasts of the Lord, and we have them here in Deuteronomy chapter 16. We know it is unleavened bread, which is 7 days of unleavened bread. It is called the bread of affliction. What have we taught on this? We understand that this 7 days of unleavened bread, which is of affliction, is the prophetic understanding of the 7 years of seals. But how does it play out? Well, turns out it's 6 days as the 6 years of seals, and then on the 7th day is a solemn assembly. Well, what was I saying in the opening if you're newer? It's in the 7th year of seals is the great multitude rapture. So you've got 6 days as 6 years of seals tribulation, and then you've got the 7th year of seals, and in the midst of the 7th year of seals is the solemn assembly. Then we have the Feast of Weeks. The Feast of Weeks is 1 day. And then we've got Tabernacles. And Tabernacles is observed for a full 7 days. And this is what we know about the 7 years of trumpets as the 7 years of trumpet judgments as the 7 days of Tabernacles. It is 6 years, and then is there a rapture? Is it the post-trib when they all get to be gathered back? No. That doesn't happen until the Jubilee, which means in that final 14th year, or that 7th year of trumpet judgments, there's events that are taking place that isn't quote unquote the same as a rest, if you will. It's God's judgment, as we've spoken about many times, in that 14th year. So what happens after that 14th year? Well, it's Leviticus, right? After the 7 days, you have what? The 8th day, which is a holy convocation, and lo and behold, a solemn assembly. What is that 8th day? That 8th day, as you guys all know, is like the 7 years of seals, 6, and then the 7th is the solemn assembly. That's the great multitude rapture. You've got 7 years of trumpet judgments. And then on the 8th, which is the 15th year, is the 8th day new beginning, which represents the Jubilee in the big picture of 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, and 7. Making this really the 49th year in a Jubilee cycle, like we just counted in Leviticus, and it makes this the final Jubilee. So the last 2 sevens, the 7 of seals and the 7 of trumpets, are the last 2 sets of 7 years in a 49-year cycle count. And we're going to touch on what happens in this final 14th year, which is why there's no solemn assembly until the 8th day, which is also called the new beginning, which is the Jubilee. This is a big deal to understand. So we've seen this unequivocally played out in the three feasts of the Lord when they're to appear to the Lord. But which one comes first? The one that comes first is, as you guys know, it is the Feast of Weeks. It is the Feast of Weeks. The middle feast is the first one. It's the one that represents the pre-trib. It's the one that represents Luke and the time of the bride of Christ. The ones from in the beginning. Those that are spirit-filled with the Spirit of God, who are the sons of God. We've showed this in the past, that it plays out like the crosses, right? Like the crosses of Calvary. How does it play out? Well, watch this. You see right here, Jesus is, of course, the middle one. Well, that's interesting, right? Christ was the middle cross, and on our left, his right, there was a guy on the cross, and this guy on the cross, what did he do? He repented, right? He came to the Lord, and what was he told? He was told in Luke chapter 23, he was told that in verse 43, and Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today thou shalt be with me in paradise. So you have Christ on the cross as the middle cross. You have the one to our left, his right, which he is told would go to paradise. And then you've got the third one. Everything's in three, guys. Everything is in threes. We've shared on that so many times. It's always in threes. And look at what it represents. Look at what we do with podiums. The podium plays out the same. Number one is in the middle. Why wouldn't they do it 1, 2, 3 like this? But it's not how they do it. They do it like this. There's number one, there's number two, there's number three. As in heaven, right? As above, so below. As in heaven, so on the earth. There he was, the middle on the cross, turned to the guy on his right and said, today you'll be with me in paradise. And then, of course, there's third. What's it a picture of? It's the same thing like the cross. First, then second, then third. And we've shown this from 2 Corinthians chapter 12 many, many times over the years. I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago. The first one is like a rapture. For those that say there is no word rapture, yes, there is. It's called caught up. You look at the word, it's the Greek word, 726. And the Greek word for 726 is caught up. And it means harpazo in the Greek, which means rapture in English. Where does the first one go? To the third heaven. This is Paul. This is the prophetic typology in the conversation. Then he says, so there's the first one. Where did Jesus go? Did Jesus go to heaven? Yep. Remember what he said? He went to go be with the Father. He went to go be with the Father, and this guy, he told he was going to paradise. Where does the second group go? The second group, and I knew such a man, so not in Christ like the first one. And where does this one go? Was caught up. This is the mid-trib great multitude rapture, and they're going to paradise. Just so happens it represents the second podium position, the second cross position. He repented. There wasn't any baptism. There was no time for anything, but he repented. It was heartfelt, and the Lord said, bang, you'll be in paradise. Why didn't he get to go to heaven? Why didn't he get to go to heaven with the Lord? Why paradise? Hello. See? And we've taught on these things before. And then what do we see as the third time? Look at what it says for the third time. Behold, in verse 14, behold, the third time I am ready to come to you. Okay? And I will not be burdensome to you, for I seek not yours, but you. For the children ought not to lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children. So, pre-trib taking, mid-trib taking, and a post-trib coming to you. and you as the parents, because the Jews are the people of God, and they have known for millenniums the writings, the visitations, the wilderness. They've known all these things. We're the ones who are the children. We're the ones that have been scattered, grafted in with the house of Israel. These guys are the ones that always had their books and kept them going and brought them forward and so forth. They're the parents being represented. Now he's saying the third time, I am coming for you. Pre, mid, post. Third heaven, paradise, and what's theirs going to be? The city when he returns, the millennial reign. We saw this exact same thing, as you guys will remember, in fragment 5 from the Apocrypha. It says, as the elders say, then those who are deemed worthy of an abode in heaven will go there. Others will enjoy the delights of paradise, and others will possess the splendor of the city. For everywhere the Savior will be seen, according as they will be worthy who see him. But that there is a distinction between the habitation of those who produce 100-fold, and of that of those who produce 60-fold, and that of those who produce 30-fold, for the first will be taken into the heavens. That's the third heaven, like 2 Corinthians. The second class will dwell in paradise. That's the mid-trib great multitude rapture. And the last will inhabit the city. Hello. It's not maybe. It's not kind of. It's pre, mid, and post. And the pre, mid, and post are connected to the 3 feasts of the Lord when they're to appear to him. And the first one is the Feast of Weeks. The question is, what start of year? Okay, that's question 1. The next piece, of course, is the 6 days, and then the 7th assembly, and then the 7 days, and then the 8th day of assembly, which means the 8th day of assembly, where am I? Which means, where am I, Leviticus? Where's that 8th day? Right here. Oh. I forgot I went back up. The 8th day is a prophetic picture of the Jubilee year. 6 years of seals, 7th year solemn assembly, 7 years of trumpet judgments, and then the solemn assembly on the 8th day, which represents the Jubilee. So you've got your Feast of Weeks, pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, not only at his return, but when they're then gathered back from where they've been sent. Okay? That's the Jubilee year. The question in it is, okay, we've understood it like this. It's clearly identified and understood from Deuteronomy 16. We could see it in the 3 placements of the cross. We could see it in the words Jesus said to his right side, to the guy on his right. And we've understood it from 2 Corinthians chapter 12. We've understood it from the fragments in the Apocrypha. Well, what does the 8th day mean? Again, something we've talked about. We've understood this in the past. Let me just close these out. Okay, we've understood this in the past, but what is the significance of the 8th day of Tabernacles? Okay, the significance of the 8th day is often interpreted as representing new beginning. It is representative of a new beginning. Well, what is the new beginning? Jubilee is the ultimate new beginning, isn't it? The Jubilee is the beginning of the millennial reign. Hello. So the question is, what do we have scripturally that points us to this? Well, this is what we see right here. Okay? This is your 8th day, Shmini Aretz, which would be what? Well, like we said, if you have Shavuot, right, at the true Feast of Weeks, maybe not here, but at the true Feast of Weeks goes first. You have your 7 days of unleavened bread, 6, and then the 7th. And then you have your 7, and then the 8th, which represents the Jubilee. Now, watch what happens. It says, this is from a writing that I found. It says, it is no coincidence that the Jubilee trumpet is only sounded on Yom Kippur, marking the beginning of the Jubilee, the 50th year. Yom Kippur is the 10th day of the first month on the civil calendar. Therefore, the Jubilee year is offset from the regular civil years by 10 days, beginning 10 days later than regular years. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing the exact same thing that we've talked about in relation to accession and non-accession, a mystery found from 1951 in a book that was written, for which another guy discovered in, I think it was in the 90s. I think it was by Thiel, who discovered in the 90s and didn't know about this, but then wrote about it. And it was this mystery of the kings from the house of Israel and from the house of Judah. Well, we know that when Christ came the first time, he came and fulfilled the spring feasts. Okay? It doesn't mean the whole story of them is done, but he fulfilled the spring feasts. When he's coming this time, its relation is to the fall feasts. And when we've talked about this, when Jesus came the first time, what did he say? I came not but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The lost sheep of the house of Israel. What about the house of Judah? In the end, they will be gathered together as one, but he said he came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. What about Judah? Well, we know that they've been blinded for us, right? Well, how fitting that Christ came and fulfilled the spring feasts, because the house of Judah, for its kings, begins its count in the spring. But the house of Judah, which will be fulfilled in the fall feasts, the fall seasons, the tribulation time, what is he doing? He's coming to fulfill those feasts, and the attention is now what? Well, just like who's in the land of Israel right now. It's the house of Judah. It's not the house of Israel. So the house of Judah counts from the fall feasts. And so could it be, as we've talked many times, that this is the beginning of the year? And when I say this, I want to, as I'm going through this, I want to eliminate the confusion of saying, oh, this calendar or that calendar. You know, it might be, and I might talk about it occasionally tonight, where there still might be the offsetting of the moon. But my point in what I want to share, so it stays clear in a visual, is just stick with what the Hebrew calendar has for its dates. Okay? If it's not these dates, it could only be off by a few days, maybe 6 or so days. You'll see why. We've talked about it before in relation to the moon, but we want to stick for the visual by showing it from the Hebrew calendar. So you guys have understood this now for a while, that we know why it's connected to the fall feasts, and it's not simply because he fulfilled the spring feasts. It's also because when he came the first time, he said it was for the house of Israel. We know in the end he's going to fulfill the fall feasts, and we've got this connection to them having been saved and then coming in, and it reverting back to the house of Judah to fulfill the fall feasts. And we know in the accession and non-accession that the kings of Judah count from Tishri 1 as day 1, month 1 for the accession of their kings. Even if they came into power sometime earlier, their day 1, month 1 doesn't start until the Feast of Trumpets. So here's what I'm saying. Yes, we've understood this, but this has to be the connection to the end of days. We've shown this connection and we'll talk about it more in the next teaching, we've shown this connection in a connection from Taurus that then brings us to a count that ends the 50 days right here and begins the 14 years right here, which is incredibly powerfully exactly fitting to the count that we had biblically. But is there another way to look at it? Is there another way to look at it where this is the beginning of the year? Yeah, of course. That's what all this is showing us, that this is the beginning of the year. Look at what it said. And it's something we've talked about. It's no coincidence that the trumpet of the Jubilee is sounded on the 10th day of the beginning of the year on Yom Kippur. Well, how is it the 10th day of the beginning of the year, or from the beginning of the year? The only way it could be the 10th day from the beginning of the year is if they're counting this as the beginning of the year. Well, that is what the house of Judah counts at the beginning as the beginning of the year. And 10 days later is, of course, Yom Kippur. What do we know about this connection? Well, we know this connection biblically, literally biblically, and connected in Matthew's discourse to be exactly how the year is supposed to start. And we're going to talk about that, but I want you to see that, can we look at this as simply the overall start of the year, since we know it's the time of the house of Judah? Okay, we're going to look into that, but I want you to check this out. This is something we shared maybe a few years ago. We had taught on it, we had understood it, and then somebody had shared this teaching with us as well, and we were able to pull some nuggets to show that, see, it's not just me that had understood this. You see, we understand these things and we reveal them from Scripture, and when that happens, somebody shares a document, something they found, something another teacher or pastor had talked about, and we're able to show that connection and where it is. So let's have a quick listen to this and see what he has to say about the times of Noah. Okay? So what did we see there? We can see that the day of the Lord is a year long, and that this year long is going to be a year and 10 days. Because when it's over, it's got to be the sounding of the Jubilee, which is a year and 10 days. Well, at a year and 10 days, the only way that happens is if Tishri is the beginning of the year for the count. Okay? So very powerful in relation to the prophetic. So let's see this storyline. Something, again, that if you're new and you start to watch the intro series, as I spoke about in the beginning, you will understand why Matthew's discourse is the only one that talks about the days of Noah. Because its conversation of the days of Noah is immediately following the tribulation of those days. What is this time? Right here. Immediately following the tribulation of those days is the end of the 6th year of trumpets, or the end of 13 years of tribulation. It's the end of the 6th year of trumpet judgments. Remember what we saw in relation to the 3 feasts of the Lord. There were 7 of total tribulation time. There were 7 years in relation to it for tabernacles, and the 8th day was assembly, whereas the 7th day was assembly in relation to unleavened bread. The reason why is because this final year is the year of the Lord, the day of his vengeance, the year, right? The day of the Lord, the year of his vengeance. This is something we've spoken on many times, which means when this is over, it's a year and 10 days long. And the reason it's an extra 10 days is because it will be from the time that was as it was in the days of Noah. Because the days of Noah are what? The days of Noah started on the 2nd month, 17th day, and they ended on the 2nd month, 27th day. Now, what happens when we see something like this? It ends, you see, on the 2nd month, 27th day. And it starts on the 2nd month, 17th day. So in relation first to the story from Matthew, when you understand it goes Luke's discourse, Mark's discourse, Matthew's discourse, and you realize that this is the final 7th year of trumpet judgments, now it makes sense because it's 1 year and 10 days long as the days of Noah are. Which means the 49th year of this cycle of 49, only the 49th year is 1 year and 10 days long, so that it blows blows the shofar for the sounding of the Jubilee, when all the recompense and everything will be brought back to them and given back on the Day of Atonement in the 50th year. And this is a big deal because, again, he is saying that we see that Luke, or Jesus, in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus proclaimed Isaiah chapter 61. Okay? In verse 17, and there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah, and when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, and to preach deliverance to the captives, and the recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. And he closed the book. Why did he close the book? Okay, here's where it is. Just as Nelson Walters was just talking about in Isaiah 61. Here he was proclaiming Isaiah 61 verse 1 and 2, but verse 2, he closed it with, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. Why didn't Jesus also proclaim, and the day of vengeance of our God to comfort all that mourn? Why didn't Jesus complete the story? Do you know why? Because for those of you who have been around for a bit, We know in order Luke chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. 7 days to the 8th day, 40 days of the Son of Man in chapter 2, a picture of the end of seals, the 7th year, the end of the 6th, the start of the 7th year of seals is a prophetic picture in Luke chapter 3. And in Luke chapter 4 is the prophetic picture of the final 14th year of tribulation. And look at how it starts. He's being tempted for 40 days by the devil. Well, why is that so powerful? Well, because if you'll remember, in Genesis chapter 7, when that final year as Noah starts, how does it start? 40 days and nights, right? It's the 40 days. So what do we have prophetically in the end of days? We've got the pre-trib, the 7-day wedding, and then the Lord returns as the Son of Man, the white horse rider, to begin his 40 days. And that's why we have the prophetic picture of the 7 days, yet 7 days after 7 days. Then we've got the 40 days. And then, of course, we've got the end of 50 days, and then the 7 and 7 as the 7 years of seals, the 7 years of trumpets. We've all talked about that before. But in Matthew's context, it's not this picture. It plays out as 1 year and 10 days. Something, again, you guys know, and we've spoken about it. And what is this final day of the Lord? Well, in Luke chapter 4, just like the final year, as it was in the days of Noah, 2nd month, 17th day, 40 days and 40 nights begin. And so what do we get in Luke chapter 4? The 40 days where he's being tempted of the devil. We know that the second half of trumpets, from 10.5 to the end of the 2.5 years, or for 2.5 years to the end of the 13th year, everything was given to Satan. The pit was open. The beast came back. The false prophet was there. Absolute chaos for the last 2.5 years of the 13 years. Okay, so now the Lord has returned. He's come down, feet down, immediately after the tribulation of those days. It's Matthew's discourse as it was in the days of Noah, and it starts with the 40 days as the 40 days of Noah, and he's being tempted of the devil because the devil had been cast down 2.5 years earlier. Everything was given to him in a moment of time. All of this, he's on the temple. And what does this all represent? This is a picture from the beginning of the 40 days to when Satan was defeated. Right? The prophetic picture to when Satan will be defeated and bound for 1,000 years. This is the prophetic picture built into this. And then the fame of the Lord goes out everywhere, and he taught in the synagogues, being glorified of all. So when he's reading here to preach the acceptable day of the Lord, and he doesn't include the vengeance of our God, but he ends with this proclamation of the Jubilee, it's because this final 14th year of the day of the Lord, which is the year of his vengeance, is over. So he's only proclaiming now the Jubilee. We see this same story in Zechariah 14. In Zechariah 14, boom, there's the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord in Zechariah 14, as you guys know, is a prophetic picture of the 14th year of tribulation. The Lord is there. It's the beginning of the day of the Lord. It's the war, the battle that breaks out. He's standing feet down on the Mount of Olives. He destroys all of the enemies. It's the time of the winepress. And when it's all over, it's like him. This part will now be over. The day of the Lord, the year of his vengeance, is done. He's defeated Satan. He's bound in chains. The 14th year is over. And now he's proclaiming the acceptable year of the Lord. That's exactly the reason why he plays it out like that. It is absolutely beautiful, awe-inspiring, miraculous revelation found in all of this. It is mind-blowing how wildly exciting it is to be able to understand this. It is proof from Luke in order in chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. It is proof from Genesis. It is proof from Isaiah. It's proof in the pre, mid, and post and in the discourses, and why it's Luke first, then Mark and Matthew, and why that final year is as it was in the days of Noah, only found in Matthew? All of it is revealing the same thing. Let's listen now to the final part, this other piece that I had, for the next couple minutes to see him confirm these exact things that we're talking about. No. There you go. You guys heard that, right? If you've been around for a little bit, you've heard that before. We're seeing a number of things in this revelation. Not only are we seeing that the account is telling us that Feast of Trumpets, what the calendar tells us is the 7th month, the civil calendar into the house of Judah is month 1. It's also telling us that we've understood, as we've taught on, we've known this over the years, that the discourses in order from Luke, Mark, Matthew are understood. It shows us that in relation to Matthew 24, that the reason for as it was in the days of Noah is at the final 1 year representation in Matthew's discourse represents that final 14th year, because in that final 14th year is the vengeance of the Lord, that day of years, which is the vengeance of the Lord. And in it, we're told it's as Noah's, and Noah's is 1 year and 10 days. And the only time it could be 1 year and 10 days is in the 49th year of a Jubilee count. It's absolutely everywhere. So this ends up bringing us back to the Jubilee, and it being representative of what? The 8th day of Tabernacles, the new beginning. Not because it's going to all end at Tabernacles. It's not it's going to end at the Feast of Trumpets, and then 10 days later, it'll be the sounding of the shofar, and all those that were taken on the wings of an eagle will come back from the wilderness. You see? And then it'll be the restoration of all things. They will receive their portions of land and everything else. It's a carbon copy playout of the revelation that we have shown here over the years with incredible accuracy all throughout the scriptures. Which means they're not going to come back here. The Lord will come back, feet down on the Mount of Olives, to fulfill this final year, because it's the day of the Lord and the year of his vengeance. And in that, when that year is done, which will be 1 year and 10 days, bang, there's that 10-day Jubilee sounding. So these are all things we've understood. Well, if you noticed, where do we have the Jubilee? The Jubilee should start in 2038, according to the revelation that we have here. Could it go where it's 38 to 39? You see what I'm saying? Could this be, you see, Feast of Trumpets, could it be that it starts 39, on the other side? Maybe there's something to that. We're in that range. But how did we get this range? How did we come to understand these time frames? What was it that gives us more clarity to believe and to understand? Why are we diligently continuing to seek and to search out this time frame that we've been in for the last several years? Sure, the world, the events of the world, sure, absolutely. We've got that 2010 video that we knew, that was shared the morning before COVID was declared a global pandemic. We knew that within that video from 2010 that it would be a global pandemic. It would start in China. It would spread to the whole world, right? Restrictions, lockdowns, everything else. It was in the video. And then within that video, there would also be a short Middle Eastern war. It would settle down. And once it settles down, then comes the big war, which would be World War III. We've known these things. And then we get a video that confirmed it and also added something we didn't know about the coming C9, C19 that happened. The rest of the story outside of that, we've understood, and it was right there in a video from 2010 giving us the same clues of understanding. So seeing what's happening now in the world and seeing what's going on with Israel and Iran and seeing that Israel attacked, I mean, it baffled my mind that the retaliation in Haifa and Tel Aviv didn't happen yet. But God's timing will be perfect. God's timing will be perfect. And as much as it appears, based on a Hebrew calendar, Feast of Trumpets start, even though it appears that that time is gone, there still are some possible connections in the time frame we're in. And it might even be that it's next year. Not all the way, but sometime in the summer of next year. But I'm not saying that to scare you or to upset anybody, but it's in the range. Does it seem probable or likely? No, with what we've seen going on in the Middle East. I mean, my goodness. We're expecting this retaliation that would hit Haifa and Tel Aviv. And before that retaliation happens, I mean a real attack on Haifa and Tel Aviv. Before that happens, the bride is gone. Not maybe, not kind of. The bride is gone. It's a surety that the bride is gone. Well, I want to show you guys something. And we're going to talk more in a moment in relation to this Noah's flood and more things that it's telling us about it. But I want to show you, remembering that this is a beginning of a year. And if this is a beginning of a year, and it is the fall feast time, and it's the Judah time and everything else for this time that will begin it all, then is it possible we can go forward and account from it? Instead of a count that begins from Nisan, for which we were looking for Sivan, and maybe it starts from this as the beginning of the year and doing the count forward this way. I'll show you what I mean now. Okay? If Jesus, as we've shared many times, if Jesus is declaring, which he is, it's not kind of believed, it's absolutely believed that Jesus is declaring the Jubilee. And I'm going to show you links and stuff to this as well. So, if Jesus is declaring the Jubilee, and we know from Luke chapter 3 that it was about his birthday and then a little bit later, we know that in Luke chapter 3, it was the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar when Jesus was baptized, when he began to be about 30, and we've looked to see what these time frames could be, okay? So I did another search on it to see if there was anything beyond 29 AD, okay? What year was the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar? Even AI gave us 29 AD, okay? 29 AD. Everywhere was 29 AD. There were some who believe it's 27. I've even seen 26 AD. But you know what happens? If you believe that it's 26 or 27 AD, then you don't end up with a Jubilee here. If you believe it was 28 AD, you end up here. You believe it was 27 AD, then you end up here. If you believe it was 26 AD, you would end up right here. Well, we've just clearly shown the tribulation is 14 years. And then the 15th year is that 8th day, the Jubilee. So it couldn't have been 26 AD, nor 27, nor 28. It has to be 29 AD. But maybe there's something within the count of 29 AD. Maybe it goes 29-30. And maybe we're on the 28-29 side, and it needs to be on the other side of the count. But there's nothing that says, 30 or 31 or 32. We don't find that anywhere. Nowhere do we find that. So it's all connected to 29 AD. And this is important for us to understand. You see, was Jesus declaring the Jubilee in Luke chapter 4? Even the AI will tell us yes. You go look up all the writings. It's not me saying it. We discovered its prophetic meaning in its timing, but it's everywhere that Jesus was declaring the Jubilee. And it's obvious, because all we got to do, of course, is go to Isaiah 61 and see that he's proclaiming the liberty, which is the declaration of the Jubilee of the proclamation of liberty. So it's got to be somewhere around this connection to 29 AD. Could it be that the count is on the other side, the back side, instead of on the front side? Like, does a year start at the 0 or does a year start at 1? Something we've shared on and spoken on many times over the years. Well, let me show you something. You heard what Nelson said here. If you caught that towards the end, is that the final 14th year is going to be a year and 10 days long. Now, to him, he thinks it's the 7th year. He believes, and he rightly believes, although not in a 14-year picture, he believes that it'll be 6 years of tribulation, and then the Lord will return, feet down, and it'll be the year of God's wrath, the year of his vengeance, and that it'll be 1 year and 10 days long. In a 7-year thinking, that's pretty good, because that's accurate. The only problem is he's missed the first 7. All right? So what does he say it would be? Well, he knows that the Jubilee is what comes after the tribulation. He knows the Jubilee comes after the 49th year, and he believes that it's one set of 7, and that 7 is the final 7 of 49, because what follows is the Jubilee. Because if the Jubilee is the proclamation of liberty to all the people, then why would it be that it's the second 7 or the third 7 or the 5th 7? It has to be the final 7 in a 7-year thinking. So people that think 7 years, they have to believe, if they have understanding of what the Jubilee is, they know that the 7 years must be these final 7, the 7th 7, so that the Jubilee can be declared, which is the restoration of all things. That's clear, isn't it? That much is clear. And Nelson Walters agrees with that. He has that understanding. Though he believes it'll be 6, then the year of recompense for the Lord, which will be 1 year and 10 days, which is correct in that place, and then it would be the Jubilee. He's right in that. Unfortunately, he's missed this part. Okay? But he's right in this portion of his understanding. That final 49th year has to be the final 7 of 49, so that the millennial reign begins with the Jubilee after the Lord's vengeance. Why? Because it is right there for us in Scripture. It's right here. It is right here declared for us. So what does that mean? Why am I harping on this? Why am I really hammering on this? What does the Jubilee have to do with all this? Well, the Jubilee has the same thing to do with this as the 70 years does that's supposed to start everything, the end of 70 years. If Tiberius Caesar was 29 AD, the question is, if it was 29 AD, like we have right here, how do we, 29 AD is, should it be 29, but there should have been a year zero because there is a year zero in the sun, moon, and stars. Does that technically, would that actually make it 30 to 31? It's got to be in this range. I didn't make this up. It's all over the historical writings. But here's the thing, guys. The historical writings were going back because there was no Gregorian calendar until like 500 years ago. There was no Gregorian calendar. So over the last several hundred years, they went back and accounted for it as Jesus being, as we've talked about before, being born in year 1. They didn't have a year 0. So in doing this accounting, they had to do it for all historical records. Do you get that? I think that's something we all forget. The Gregorian calendar hadn't been around except for the last 500 years, which means every single ancient writing in history that we go back to BC or in the AD had to be converted based on the Roman calculation, on the Gregorian calendar calculation, because it didn't exist. Hello. Everything we read, everything is converted now to the Gregorian calendar, which has only been around for 500 years, based on their interpretation of the time of Jesus' birth. Hello. Could it be a little bit off? Could there be something? We've shown that there have been, right? But look at this. Everybody, virtually I should say, everybody is in agreement that when Jesus said that, it was a declaration for the Jubilee in the 29th year. So here's the thing, right? If we're going Feast of Trumpets to Feast of Trumpets, there's the start of Feast of Trumpets. There's 29 of Elul. There's the beginning of Feast of Trumpets right here. He would have declared the Jubilee in 29 AD at Atonement. Okay? So that would have been in the year 29 Tishri to 30 AD, right at the time of Tishri. So really, he would have declared it like somewhere going in here to right here. Okay? So there's your declaration in 29 AD. Interesting, right? It's right there based on account from 2 BC. But we've had this conversation many times where we flip-flopped, right? What if there is a year 0? We did a teaching on it, right? What if there's a year 0? What if there's something glitched with that count because of the year 0 or not having a year 0? Everything lines up on a Gregorian count. On a Gregorian count, there it is. On a Gregorian count, there's the death and resurrection. And everything fits. Guys, there's something, because watch what happens. 29 AD. Let's go to the calculator. 29, okay? Like 29 AD. Let me show you something. If we add, and this is something I discovered a few years ago, and I saw, actually, I ended up coming across teachings on it that do the same thing as me. When is a Jubilee? when the 49th year is fulfilled, then the first year of the next set, so watch what happens. Let's go, here was the last one, you're going to see it. 1989 to 1990 was a Jubilee based on the count from 29 AD when Jesus declared the Jubilee. Okay? Now, how did we get this count? What you have to understand is the Jubilee is the first year of the next set of 7 years. Okay? So what would it be? This would have been the 49th year right here, and this would have been the Jubilee year. This 50th year is the first year of the next set of 7, because everything goes by sevens. You see, look what happens. Remember what we were talking about in relation to the 8th day. Okay? If the 8th day is the great 8th day, did I move it again? No. If the 8th day of Tabernacles is a prophetic picture of the 15th year of tribulation, which is the Jubilee, then what does the 8th day represent? The 8th day represents the Jubilee. And it's like counting your 7 Sabbaths. 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. It just keeps going. There's not some random insert of 50 and then doing another 7. Watch what happens if you do one way compared to the other. If 29 AD and then the next year is the Jubilee, or sorry, 29 is the Jubilee. Let me just show you so you could, let me show it back here where it is, so it can be clear for you. There's your 29 AD Jubilee declaration. What is it? It's the first year of the next 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. Okay? If you understand it that way, and you go 29 AD, then that means you're going to add 49 years. At the end of 49 would be your next Jubilee. Okay? So for this, I'm going to skip to this because we've got consecutive numbers here. So this would be your 49th year, and this would be your Jubilee in 1989, which is also not only the 50th year, but it's year 1, right, of the next set of 7. What is it also? Well, if this is 7, then this becomes what? 8. What is Tabernacles? 7 days, and then the 8th day, and the 8th day is new beginning, which is Jubilee. So first year of the next 49 is the first of 7 years, first year of this first 7, but it's also the Jubilee, the 8th day. Okay, look what happens when it's over. There's your 7th 7, and then this would be your Jubilee. Okay, watch what happens. So 49, which means when 49 is over, because we're not doing 50s, the first is the 50th. Watch what happens. We're going to add. 49, 49, 49, 49. See, there's our 1989. And then look at the next one. 2038. This is the Jubilee. Look at all the things taking place in the world right now. All of the craziness, all of the chaos. Is it possible that maybe there was a twist and there's a little bit longer? Or the way things were counted? I mean, it's hard to refute a simple, straightforward calculation from 29 AD. It's very hard to refute it. Let me show you what other people believe. Many people, if not most, because most agree in 29 AD was a declaration of the Jubilee. And if that's the case, and most people believe that the 50th isn't the first of the next 7, but stands as its own 50th, and the next one is the Jubilee, is the year 1 of the next 7, then watch what happens. You ready for this? 2029. Okay? I had this recently shared with me in relation to question because Mark Biltz counts this way. The only way Mark Biltz could have gotten to 2029 is by going to the 29 AD and counting 50, 50, 50 for each Jubilee. So for Mark Biltz to believe this is a Jubilee, as many people do, he believes then that this right here would be the Jubilee year. Are you tracking now why I shared what I shared? This cannot be a Jubilee year. How can 29 AD be a Jubilee year when I've just shown you that the tribulation, and we've known for years, of course, if you've been around for a while, that the tribulation is unequivocally 14 years. Unequivocally. We have shown it from creation to the end of Revelation. It is 14 years. So how could 29 AD be the Jubilee that people want to talk about? So let me show you the confusion in this, because in a Mark Biltz case, he believes that because this is the Jubilee, that it's the time of what? Setting the captives free in liberty, right? So he believes that it's connected to the pre-trib. Impossible. I just showed you that the final year of tribulation is a year and 10 days in a 49-year cycle, and it is proclaimed by the end being 10 days longer to proclaim, as Scripture said, at atonement. Do you understand? This is impossible that this could be connected to the pre-trib, because it's all about the end of the 49-year cycle. So guess what? If you're to believe Mark Biltz, and if it turned out that it was really counting by 50s from the time of 29 AD in Christ's time, and clearly 2029 cannot be the Jubilee we're looking for, because it has to be the end of tribulation. This would have to be the end right here. This would have to be the 14th year of tribulation and a year and 10 days, and on the 10th day of 2029 at atonement would be the Jubilee sounding. You can't even have 6 years of tribulation. It's impossible. Which means if you're to believe that, then it gets even worse. Because here's what it means. 2079 would be the Jubilee. Minus 14 years of tribulation, because the 79 would be the beginning of the Jubilee, would mean 2065. Oh, no! 2065 would be the beginning of the 14 years of tribulation. Would be the beginning of the 14 years of tribulation. Would somebody mind explaining to me any connection to a 70-year count of Israel coming into the land? Right? In the next one, we're going to talk about the coming into the land, but connect it to the Jerusalem piece. Because God's land is Jerusalem, not Israel. His name is there. Remember what he says. In fact, he even says it right here in Leviticus 25. He says, he's talking about the counting and so forth. Then he says, the land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. Okay? It's not going to be for them always. It's not going to be theirs always. He's going to take it back. Well, is he taking back all of the land of Israel? No. Jerusalem is his. Just like Zechariah chapter 1 says. So is it possible that there is an understanding that gives us this into 25 year, into 2025, that would push this out by additional year? Is it possible? Yes, it is. It is possible from a declaration of Jerusalem when it was given to them. Look at 1967. If you want to go 1967 and go 70 years and then it starts, you're still off by what? Almost 30 years? 29 years? So if you're to believe 29 AD and then another Jubilee, because 29 AD can't be the Jubilee for tribulation being over, then you would have to wait till 2065. Do you understand why I'm persistent? Do you understand why I know the revelation that's been given? I know it's around here somewhere. Whether it's what I'm going to go into next further, or whether it's next year, it can't be like out here. It can't be years and years out. Another year somewhere, maybe, yeah, possibly. But 2065? Not possible. What's the difference between the two? Counting 49 and then the Jubilee being year one, the 50th year being year one of the next set of 49. Otherwise, we've got what? 40 more years to go? Do you believe that? I sure don't. Could it be a Gregorian count, a year zero something? And maybe we're still in it with what I'm about to show, but maybe we have to go into 2025? I can live with that. I know it's not going to be easy for everybody. I know it's not exciting. But that means God's not finished. We can't force his hand. Do I believe we're being prepared here in this ministry? Absolutely, unequivocally, the evidence is insurmountable. Do I think that's going to continue on for another 40 years? Hell no. Nothing points to that. Could you imagine 40 more years? Could you imagine what the world would look like in another 40 years? With everything, the speed of everything and how it's moving? One more year in all of this? I can do that. It's not even a whole year if need be. Maybe what? 9, 10 months maybe? I think we can do that. I'm not saying we have to. I'm just saying as a precautionary tale. Because I'm going to show you what some of these other things are in relation to this being the beginning of the year. Okay? Watch this. What about this Noah's flood thing? What did Scripture tell us? We'll come back to this in a sec. What did Scripture tell us about Noah's flood? It said it was the second month, 17th day of the month. Well, if you've been seeing posts in the forum, and by the way, if you're hearing me talk about the forum, you can join from the Ministry Revealed website. Go into the menu box, click on forum, and on there, there's about 1,300 people from around the world, like-minded brothers and sisters, diligently seeking and searching and sharing and praying and news events and all sorts of things. And you can join in there. It's for free. It'll take you 5-10 seconds to sign up. You can come join us in there. But I've seen this posted, and it caused me to stop for a moment and consider it. It says the second month, 17th day. Well, if I were to ask you the second month, 17th day of the year, I would say that the vast majority of you would say it was the 17th of Iyar. Right? The 17th of Iyar. Second month, right? Nisan, month 1. Iyar, month 2. 17th day of the second month. Iyar 17. Wouldn't that be the time of the start of Noah's flood? Well, hold on to your horses. Because according to Jewish history, Noah's flood began on the 17th day of Cheshvan? The second month, 17th day, according to the history of it, wasn't from Nisan, but had to have been from, you guessed it, it had to have been from Tishri. From the Jews' beginning of the year, the civil year. Because their history says that the 17th of Cheshvan, excuse me, is the beginning of the 40 days, or sorry, is the 40 days beginning of the years of the days of Noah. Oh, well, that's interesting, isn't it? 17th day of the second month, which from the religious calendar would actually be the 8th month, but from the Hebrew calendar historically, they tell us it's the second month. This would be the 17th day of Cheshvan. Well, what's interesting about that, and is worthy of us to keep our eyes open for, is because we have our yet 7 days, right? Days as years, but also as days. This is the only one of 7 that it says yet 7 days, and then after 7 days. What do we know this as? We know this as the pre-trib happening, okay? The pre-trib happening. There's day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. There's your 7 days. What did it say? After 7 days. What is after 7 days? The Lord, the Son of Man, coming on the 8th day. When he comes on the 8th day, which is this conversation that we see here in the story of Noah, we also know, because what I shared with you is the one from Matthew that relates to the story of Noah being the entirety of 1 year and 10 days. But we also know there's another story. And that story isn't found in the discourse of Luke, but it is found in Luke 17. And this story is about the coming of the Lord, the coming of the kingdom. We've talked about it many times, where he talks about being like Matthew, coming as lightning from one end to the other. And then he says, but first, it will be, the Son of Man's days will be as it was in the days of Noah. This is because we know that the Son of Man is coming on the 8th day after the pre-trib. There's the 7-day wedding. And on the 8th day, he's coming to begin his 40 days as Noah. Well, that would make November 11th, okay? To some, they would say 11/11, which a lot of people talk about. The other one is like our brother who had the audible from the Lord as 9/11, because November is really, it was changed, right? It was Nieve, right? September was 7, October 8, November 9, December 10. Okay, those were the months until they were changed. And what happened? That would make this November 9/11. So that's interesting. So not only is it 9/11 with things that people have had happen, and there being potentially another 9/11 type of event, okay, in a mystery, but it would also give us the 8th day connected to the second month, 17th day, as the Jews say it is, which means Tishri 1, as I've been saying this whole time, would be the start of the year. Is this a possibility? In everything that we've been looking at, can this possibly be it? Yes, of course it can. But Remember what we were talking about. The story of Noah is 1 year and 10 days for Matthews. Which means if this is the start of the year and this is the 10 days, then how do we get to here being the start of the year? Kind of twist things up, right? It's this, but in the end it's this. You know? But we know things are mysteriously in prophetically, and there might be something to it. So this right here, which we're very close to, is something prophetically potential because we have understood the revelation of the 40 days of the Son of Man as Noah that are connected to Luke chapter 17. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. But if we follow the storyline in Genesis chapter 7, if we were to follow this storyline as that being the start, second month, 17th day, as Cheshvan 17, and we follow this storyline in the revelation of Luke's, and we know then the 40 days begin, and the 40 days then come to an end, right? The raven spirit, right? That Antichrist spirit goes out, then the dove on day 50. Then what does it say? 7 days as years, which is the start of Red Horse Rider tribulation. 7 days as years, plucked off, great multitude rapture. 7 days as years. That would be 7 years of seals, 7 years of trumpets. Well, that would be kind of odd, right? So that would make it, what, we're at the 10th to the 30th. There's 20 plus another 30. Put it right here. This would be the end of the 50 days. And January 1st would be the beginning of the year. Oh, wait, no, it would be before that. Because, oh, no, that's right. Yeah, from right here. So remember, when the pre-trib goes, there's 50 days according to this, because we're sticking with the story of Noah. 50 days, right? 7-day wedding. 40 days of Noah begin. When the 40 days are over, there's 3 days. So if we're at the 10th of Cheshvan and we get to the 30th, that's 20 days. And then from the 1st to the 30th, that's another 30. We needed what? 50 days. That would be the 50 days. And then what would it be? It would be the 1st of January. Okay, that's kind of interesting, right? I hadn't actually gone through to the calculation to see where it would equal. But that's pretty interesting when we understand that it's 14 years. But come on, the Lord God's not lining up all this stuff on a Gregorian calendar. It's just very interesting, though, that it falls at the start of the year on the Gregorian calendar. So 14 years would go January 1st to January 1st. That would be pretty wild if it was something as simple as that, right? So do I disregard this for this being the potential of the 40 days of the Son of Man? No, I'm not disregarding it. This is definitely a high watch from the 9th into the 10th, from the 10th into the 11th of November. Are we prayerful? Are we hopeful? Absolutely. Because we're in this window for these last couple years, maybe a year going forward, if not these times, we're in this unequivocal window of time. The Jubilee count is what proves it to us. We cannot be far off based on that count. So is this possible? Yes, it's possible. And of course, I'm going to be hopeful for it. But let's go a step further if this comes and goes. Remember, I told you I was going to give you some possible scenarios. So let's go a step further. In the Bible, John the Baptist, we know that he's about or essentially 6 months older than Jesus, right? We know this, of course, from Luke chapter 1, when it says, thy cousin hath conceived in her old age. This is the 6th month. And of course, now Mary is also pregnant. Okay? So there's 6 months between them. What do we know in relation to their birthdays? Well, listen to this. It is cosmic symbolism which inspired the church leadership in Rome to elect the southern solstice, December 25th, as the birthday of Christ, and the northern solstice as that of John the Baptist. Okay? Again, something we've talked about in relation to summer compared to winter. Okay? Listen to what it says. According to the hypothesis accepted by most scholars today, the birth of Christ was assigned the date of the winter solstice, look at this, which was December 25th in the Julian calendar. Okay? Because there was no Gregorian calendar back then. The equivalent date was this Julian calendar, which was what? The winter solstice. Which is saying, like most of the world believes that Jesus' birthday, quote unquote, is December 25th. Well, we know Gregorian wise they moved it to account, what is it, Ishtar and all that other, those ancient false gods and everything else. But the belief was of Jesus' birth being at the winter solstice. Now, I've been speaking to you guys showing that I don't believe Jesus was born at the winter solstice. I believe Jesus was born at the summer solstice. But if you recall, we've had these back and forths over the years, right? We have had these back and forths a few years back, and the last two places that I look for any connection to our season and time is either at the summer solstice or at the winter solstice. Okay? I am convinced, as convinced as I can be, that Christ truly was born at the summer solstice. If that is true, then we're looking for one more year, okay, to next year. Not a full year, but we're looking to another year, okay, into the summertime of next year. If I'm wrong and he really is connected to Christmas, or which really was the summer solstice, the winter solstice, then that would mean John was the one born at the time frame of the summer solstice. Again, which one is it? Right? Which one is it? Majority say Jesus was born, quote unquote, December 25th, or actually at the solstice. But we've seen in the teachings that we've shown with Stellarium, with, remember the planetarium guy who became a Christian because of his research of it, the lawyer who's been traveling for decades, showing the true time of Jesus' birth at the summer solstice, right, which is the 3rd month, 15th day. It was June, about the time of the summer solstice, so June 17th, I think it was claimed to be, right? So, it's still fringe to believe Christ was born at the time in June, 3rd month, 15th day. But again, this isn't something new to us either, is it? We've talked about this with the Book of Jubilees. In the 3rd month, in the middle of the month, the festival of the first harvest, Isaac was born. So Isaac was born the 3rd month, 15th day. We saw that Judah, right, for the house of Judah, we saw Judah was born on the 3rd month, 15th day. Jesus is a prophetic picture of Isaac, and Jesus is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So it makes plenty of sense that Jesus could have been 3rd month, 15th day. But remember something. Remember something. What if this was day 1, month 1? What if this is the beginning of the year back then. Look what the Jews tell us. The Jews are telling us that Noah's flood was the 17th of Cheshvan. The only way it could have been the 17th of Cheshvan is if back then Tishri was month 1. And if Tishri is month 1 in the prophetic for us in the is to come, then what would we be looking at? Month 1, month 2, month 3. Kislev would be month 3 in the same account as the Jews say from back as it was close to the beginning at the time of Noah's flood. We'd be looking at these guys from a Tishri beginning of a year, and if it's not 7 days and then the 8th day on Cheshvan 17, and we know that in reality what we're looking for is the timing of Jesus's birth. Of course, you guys all remember why, but that if that's what we're looking for, and this is the 3rd month, what would be the 15th day? Kislev 15. 3rd month, 15th day. If this is the 2nd month, 17th day in Noah's time, then back then this would have been the 3rd month, 15th day. Now, the question is, well, why isn't it over here at the solstice? Well, if you'll recall, June, everything was perfectly in line. So then you got July, August, September, October, November, December, which means the moon is off by about, this is where it should be, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bang, 6. Knowing that the moon is off, we've talked about it many times in recent teachings. I told you we would stick with the Hebrew calendar, but I might interject sometimes with the where the moon should be. So knowing that the moon is off and corrupts its ways and corrupts the feasts, this wouldn't really be the 15th day of the 3rd month. This would really be the 15th day of the 3rd month, because the moon by this point from June is off by about 6 days. And look what it is. The solstice. So whether we want to say here to just stick with the Hebrew calendar, or say here where the actual solstice is. But what does tradition tell us? Tradition tells us that back then this was this when it was the Julian calendar and going back all the way back then. And it just so happens that this year Christmas falls exactly on Hanukkah. So could we look from here, or from here, or even from here as the timing of where Jesus' birth would be? Remember what the timing of Jesus' birth is to us, right? The timing of Jesus' birth is in the beginning. In the beginning. And in the beginning was 3rd month, 15th to the 16th, right? Something we've taught on many, many times. So we would have the two options. Remember that from the account from Nisan 1? So if Tishri is Nisan 1, month 1, this would bring us to the 8th day, and this would begin the 50, or this, like Jesus' birth, and it begins the 50. You would do the same thing from here, or you would do the same thing from here. I don't want to confuse it, but those of you who've been following, at least for a little bit, you understand what I'm talking about. There's your 3rd month, 15th day. Where was our 3rd month, 15th day from in Nisan? Was right here. So all of the conversation that we had about this, all we're doing is now sliding it to say, what if this is month 1, day 1? If Cheshvan 17 is month 2, day 17, then that would state that back then at the time of Noah, Tishri was month 1, which means if that was month 1, then this is month 3, And this would be 15th day of the third month. Then we apply the same possibility of the moon being off, which brings us then to the solstice. Which, if John was born at the summer solstice, and it turns out, and it ends up turning out that Jesus was born at the winter solstice, I mean, can we prove these things? Well, let's go back to Genesis 1 for a second. And when I say prove, I don't mean in this case to say prove. I want to see if there's maybe inklings of this possibility. And here's why. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. Darkness. There was no light yet. It was darkness. If we go to John chapter 3, this is a famous thing. We've gone through this many times, and this is one of the reasons why the church has put Jesus' birth. It's one of the accompanying reasons that the church put Jesus' birth at December 25th, which really it should have been at the solstice. You remember, Jesus was not yet John was not yet cast into prison, and he was there with some of his disciples, and some of his disciples see Jesus baptizing others. And so John answered and said, this is from John chapter 3, John answered and said, a man can receive nothing except to be given him from heaven. You yourselves bear me witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but that I am sent before him. He that hath the bridegroom, he that has the bride is the bridegroom. Do you see that? He that has. He that has the bride is the bridegroom. So if we were to look at that in this case, and it's right here as his birth, 3rd month, 15th day, even though you're going to see how it's connected to here, we might be looking then that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then there is the beginning of the Lord's 8th day, as it was in the days of Noah. Because you see what it said? He that has the bride. This conversation, remember, isn't at his baptism. This is later. Remember we talked about the about 2 months? Well, this isn't the about 2 months, but in this conversation, which you're going to see is connected to the solstice. If this is the connection to the solstice and Jesus is born really at the winter solstice, and it's saying that he has the bride, then that would mean if that's him showing up, then he's already got the bride, which would have been the week earlier. So this would be what? The 9th day, but it's of the 3rd month. Maybe we got something else to look at. Hold on. You guys know where I'm going with this already. Okay? So if this is the prophetic picture of this time of his birth, then that would mean this would be the time of the bride's escape. Now, what is it most likely then? It would actually be most likely here, because this would be the 8th day and the connection to his birth. You understand what I'm saying? What did it say in, where am I? What did it say in John chapter 3? Let's continue reading. He that has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom, which stands and hears him, rejoices greatly because the bridegroom's voice. This my joy therefore is fulfilled. He must increase, but I must decrease. He that cometh from above is above all. He that is of the earth is earthly, and speaketh of the earth. He that cometh from heaven is above all. Jesus must increase. John must decrease. So if you're going to have an increasing and a decreasing, if John, this is a reason why we went back and forth years ago. Because if John was born here, he was at the peak of sun. And so he has to decrease, right? He has to decrease, and then there's Christ and the time of his birth, and he must what? He must increase. Well, what is the winter solstice? Of course, it's the darkest day of the year, right? December 21st is the darkest day of the year. Did you catch that? It's the darkest day of the year. So John has to decrease, which he would decrease to the winter solstice, and from the winter solstice, Jesus would only be able to increase. That's a connection that leads many to say, well, it must be that Jesus was born at the time of the winter solstice. I believe there's greater evidence for the opposite. However, this is something that leaves room to debate it. The only way he can increase is if he came when the sun was the lowest, and the only way John can decrease is if he came from when it was highest. Very interesting to consider. That's why I'm talking about these potential time frames that we're looking at now in this specific time. And we're all doing it because of this 70th time frame and the Jubilee count in the time frame it reveals. So we're remaining diligent on these things. So if Jesus comes at the darkest day of the year, all he can do is increase, and by that time John will have decreased. Well, if we go back to Isaiah 9, when does Jesus show up? After the light affliction, right? So we know the attack is coming on Haifa and Tel Aviv. If Jesus is coming to start his 40 days here, then that means the pre-trib would have gone first. The pre-trib would have gone first. It's like I was saying, whether we count it from here to here or whether we count it from here to here, if we're accounting for where the sun is and the 7 days earlier, for this to be the 8th day when the Lord comes to begin his 40 days, which is connected to his birth. And what do we see connected to his birth? Luke chapter 2 to his birth. But what does he say? The people that walked in darkness, walking in darkness. John chapter 8, the other prophetic picture, the 40 days of the Son of Man. Right? Where is it? John chapter 8. Same thing. You got the prophetic picture of the pre-trib bride, and then I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. Genesis chapter 1 and John chapter 1. The beginning was the Word. Well, what was it? It was darkness we saw in Genesis 1. It was darkness. And then the light of the Lord shined in it, and darkness comprehended it not. So, could it be? I'm not saying it is. I'm saying this is the time of the darkest day of the year. And when the Lord comes, it will have been after that 7-day attack, right? That 7-day Middle Eastern war where Haifa and Tel Aviv were attacked and destroyed in the light affliction. And then possibly, here comes the Lord on the darkest day of the year while darkness is in this area, and he's coming to shed his light in the darkness? Huh. It's kind of interesting, right? I find that very interesting. We even see a connection in relation to, this would be 3:15, but having to account for the moon, which would be at the solstice, this would actually be 3:15. But the world of church tells us it's December 25th. Because historically, December 25th is where the Julian calendar winter solstice was. Which means it probably also had to be the 15th of Kislev. So here, as the Son of Man's 40 days beginning, or here, connected to his birth, or is it this one for his birth? I think it'd be more accurate to count from where the sun actually is. But 1, 2, or 3 possibilities. It's not a crazy wild thing. all you do is you have a period of what? About 10 days. So here we are looking for this period of time as the pre-trib and then his potential for his 40 days beginning. The other option is pre-trib here, or pre-trib here, or pre-trib here. Or yeah. Okay? So we're looking at here, here, or here. So something for us to kind of keep an eye out at this time. What's interesting about December 25th, of course, a lot of people are talking about it, even though technically it really isn't at his birth, because his birth is would be considered at the solstice. But if we were to follow this, it's interesting because you've got the 7 days of Hanukkah, and Hanukkah is, of course, the rededication of the temple, right? They restored it on the 25th of Kislev, and what did they call it? It was when they defeated, what was it, the Romans coming against them, and the who are these guys again? The Maccabees. And the Maccabees defeated them. Whoever it was that was against them, Romans. So the Maccabees defeat them. They bring restoration. They clean out the temple and restore the temple, and they proclaim this as the dedication of the restored temple, and they celebrate it every year for 8 days. Why? Because it's a typology of tabernacles. They celebrated it, and what did they compare it to? You guessed it, the Feast of Tabernacles. Well, it's interesting for us because in John chapter 7, we see that it says the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles is at hand. And when Jesus was here 2,000 years ago, they had already been observing the Feast of Hanukkah, or the Festival of Hanukkah. We know that they had observed it because this happened about 200 years before Jesus showed up to be baptized. It had already been going on for about 200 years. So Jesus definitely knew about it. And they called it what? The dedication of the temple. They observed it for 8 days, and it was like a second tabernacles. A second tabernacle. Well, if you guys remember this as well, it's interesting because Enoch, in Genesis chapter 5, Enoch, whose name means initiated. Okay? Initiated, or let's go a little bit further. Check it out. To narrow, to train up, to what? Dedicate. What did they do at Tabernacles? It's called Second Tabernacles, which is called Hanukkah, and his name is Hanuk, or Hanukkah, you see? And they dedicated it, and it's connected to training up, or to train up. The narrow, to narrow and to train up. This sounds like what? This sounds bridely the narrow path and a group of remnant ones who are being trained up. Sounds a lot like that to me, doesn't it? Narrow and being trained up. Well, this reminds us of something because we know also that Enoch is the literal prophetic picture of the pre-trib bride. The literal prophetic picture of the pre-trib bride is Enoch. In Hebrews 11:5 that we've taught on so many times. By faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony, that he pleased God. But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is God, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Enoch is a picture of the pre-trib bride, and is a picture of the remnant who are being trained up. Those on the narrow path and those being trained up. And Hanukkah, dedicate. It's not too hard to believe. It's not a far fetch. We're in that range with all of this. But if this is the timing of his birth, I mean, the pre-trib would then be over here. But what is the word for Hanukkah? Well, it's also part of that narrow group that's trained up. So could this be the 8th day of the Lord's return and the start of the 40 days? It's possible. Could it be this is the pre-trib and it represents the 7-day wedding and the beginning of 50 days? Well, if it is the beginning of 50 days, it would bring us to the New Year of Trees. Again, something we've talked about in the past. Why is the New Year of Trees potentially significant? Well, because of this count that we've talked about so many times over the years of how to count when they come into the land, which is all about when you come into the land and shall have planted all manner of trees for food. So when did they do this planting? Of course, 1949, we did the whole count, and it was connected to Tu B'Shavat, the New Year of Trees. That would mean this is the beginning of the 14 years. That kind of seems a little odd too, doesn't it? But we have a biblical significance to this timing of the New Year of Trees. We have some significance to this time frame relating to being the 3rd month, 15th day of the birth of Christ. Well, wait a second. 3rd month, 15th day is just what we were showing here, right? 3rd month, 15th day means if this was the 3rd month, 15th day back then of course, again, Tishri was the beginning of the year, which would make the 3rd day, 15th month, whether here or accounted for here or from the Gregorian calendar 25th, that would mean that it was also back then, just like it was for Enoch, for Noah, 2nd month, 17th day being Cheshvan, that would make this the time of the Feast of Weeks, right? This 3rd month, 15th day. And what else can we know about this? Well, if we go to the story of Enoch, we know that it's believed, and we've shown this in a number of places over the years and spoken about it, that Enoch is believed to have been taken at Shavuot. They believe Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, is the 3rd month, 15th day. So 3rd month, 15th day is the Feast of Weeks, according to that count. Birth of Christ, Shavuot, connected to Enoch. And what else do we have from Enoch? Well, let me show you something. In Joshua chapter 10, we have the story of, is it not written in the book of Jasher? The sun stood still and the moon, right? But we have the story of the book of Jasher. Well, in the book of Jasher, listen to what it says. We see this connection to a census being taken when Enoch had vanished. And if you remember, we used to talk on this a long time ago when we would debate whether it was summer solstice or winter solstice connected to Jesus' birthday. And what does it say? This is now Enoch had vanished. And it said all those kings went to the place and they found the earth there filled with snow. And upon the snow were large stones of snow. And one said to the other, come, let us break through the snow and see, perhaps the men that remained with Enoch are dead and are now under the stones of snow. And they searched and found him not, for he had ascended into heaven. Snow. Is that a prophetic clue for us? That it would be a time of snow? You see, I'm showing you these things because I don't want to discount them. There is a count that begins from Tishri. The Cheshvan 17 is clearly one of them. Enoch's count potentially being here and connected to the time of snow is potentially right in this count of this time frame if Christ's birth is actually at the winter solstice and not the summer solstice. But there's more to the story, isn't there? You guys remember the other part of the story? There's more to it, right? Remember that? Isaiah chapter 9? When Jesus comes and shines his light in the darkness, does it necessarily this is what I'm saying. It doesn't necessarily say that it's because it's the darkest day of the year. It's that he is coming as that light to shine it in the darkness. The darkness, in this case, based on the affliction that came in Zebulun and Naphtali when he comes on the 8th day, which is the attack that will bring about some major destruction, not this little stuff, quote unquote, that's happening right now, but what would happen immediately after the pre-trib when Haifa and Tel Aviv are attacked. So it'll be darkness in the land where they're walking in the land of the shadow of the death, and he is that light shining in it. So as much as there is this interesting connection to the darkest day of the year, I just showed you there's a possibility to it, but you'll recall something else. You'll recall that the Jews claim to start harvesting wheat in March, April, when there is no wheat in existence. Remember that? Remember that? It's even in, what was it, Deuteronomy 16? In relation to the Feast of Weeks, which is Shavuot, it says you're going to begin to count your 7 weeks from such time that you begin to put the sickle to the corn, which obviously is wheat. It is the wheat harvest. In fact, when you even look this up, it even tells you that the Feast of Weeks, it tells you in here that the Feast of Weeks is the wheat harvest. Look at that. The time of Israel's wheat harvest. You can harvest wheat, as we've taught, you can harvest wheat in March, April. The wheat harvest doesn't begin till late May or into mid-ish late June. And what did we show about that? That if this is what they would call, well, right here, but a week later, if this is the 3rd month, 15th day, which is called Shavuot, right? Do you see the contradiction? They tell us that the 3rd month, 15th day is the time when Enoch was taken, and it being Shavuot, yet, and Jesus being born 3rd month, 15th day, is the timing of Shavuot, but they got it way back here. Anyways, so what did we talk about this? We said that if this is the beginning, then we know the 7 Sabbaths don't begin till the week after, which meant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and what did it bring us to? Tu B'Shavat, the great day of weddings. If we counted from the beginning of unleavened bread like we did in the last teaching, right? It would bring us to right here, which would make this the beginning of the 50 days, or this is the beginning of the 50 days. It just depended on whether we counted from the beginning of unleavened bread or from after unleavened bread to start the 7 Sabbath count. But we didn't do it from a Nisan count. We did it from a Taurus in the beginning count, right? So if Christ's birthday is the beginning, and on a Hebrew calendar, count, this would be the 3rd month, 15th day, but we have to do the 7 Sabbath count from the week after. Either we're going to do it from here, or we're going to do it from here. We end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it either brings us from here to here, or it brings us from here to here for the beginning of the 50 days. Isn't that interesting? Here we are landing on the new year of trees. So we've got to count from Taurus as the beginning, as it was in the beginning, and we do this count from Christ's birth, and we end up in that count ending the seventh Sabbath from when literal wheat is ready to start being harvested. We end up on the great day of weddings, the Jewish Valentine's Day. If it turns out that Jesus' birthday is the 3rd month, 15th day on a Hebrew calendar count, 3rd month, 15th day on a Hebrew calendar count from a Tishri being month 1, and then we do the same count that we were doing all this time in Taurus, we end up on the new year of trees. Again, something prophetic that we have been counting in this entirety of this 70-year count. It's pretty wild, isn't it? So, for me, does any of this, excuse me, bring clarity to when it's going to be? Like an absolute, I've got it? No, I am not certain of any of this. I want to show you that in all of this, Tishri 1 is a beginning of the year. It has a beginning of the year in the end of days. Okay? If this is the beginning of the year in the end of days, and we do this count, that takes us to Tu B'Shavat in February of 25. And from this, there is 50 days left. Remember? 7 Sabbaths and then doing the 50 days. Do you know where it takes us? It takes us to this time frame of Nisan 1. What is Nisan 1 if Tishri is the beginning of the year? It makes Nisan the 7th month. Nisan flips and becomes the 7th month, and Tishri, which is the 7th month, becomes the 1st month. That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. This isn't me making this up. I showed you guys. How could this be the 2nd month, 17th day, if it's really the 8th month? The only way that happens is if Tishri is month 1. And we've been showing for years now that in the end of days, Tishri is the beginning of tribulation. That it is the prophetic count to the end of days. The only thing is that I had it beginning from a Taurus count that got us to this time frame right here, that then led us to the beginning of the 14 years right here, which would be a beginning of the year. Hello. But if this is the beginning and we follow through on this count, we should end up at the exact same place, but exactly opposite to this beginning of the year, which makes this not Nisan 1, but would make it Tishri 1 and the beginning of the 14 years. At some point, historically, everything must have flipped. You see what I'm saying? Everything had to have flipped at some point in history. And I think I've read something about it in the past. That Tishri used to be month 1, and Nisan used to be month 7, and now Nisan is month 1, and Tishri is month 7. This and many other things is the evidence that something at some time had flipped. Because this is now 100% unequivocally the 8th month, not the 2nd. And if we're going back to the beginning, then this as the beginning, going to the 3rd month, 15th day, sticking to the Hebrew calendar, counting it out as we have understood to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, brings us to the end of the end of the 7th Sabbath and the 50 days to the time frame of Nisan 1. This is what I was telling you guys at the beginning. We simply are going to look at the possibility of doing the exact same count we did from Nisan, which took us to the 3rd month, either the 8th to the 9th or the 15th to the 16th day. And we're going to do the exact same count as we did back then. And these are the results we got. On a Hebrew calendar count, this count would begin here, and the true 7th Sabbath from a Tishri count would bring us here. So just as it brought us to the great day for weddings, from a Nisan count to when wheat is literally harvested and when the 7 Sabbaths are to count, it brings us to either the 8th to the 9th of the 5th month, or it brings us to the 15th, 16th, and the time of the great day of weddings. Here, like the other one, brings it to nothing, or from the week after, brings us to the New Year of Trees. Both of them have a significant potential prophetic understanding, because one relates to great day for weddings and love, and the other one is to the count of trees that we've been talking about for years of when Israel came into the land. It's very, very interesting. So we've got stuff to look forward to. So what does that mean? Well, if you recall, in relation to this count, when Jesus fulfilled this, as I bring it to an end, when Jesus fulfilled this, we know it wasn't actually at his birthday, right? We know this from Matthew chapter 4, because when Jesus fulfilled it, John was now in prison. Here's the fulfillment of Isaiah 9, from the was into the is. But John was in prison, which we've shown many times is 2 months later, which means we do the count from the week after. We start from the first Sabbath, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th Sabbath, right there. And then what happens? 2 months later, brings it right here. Right? It's the exact same count we were doing before. That if this is the same picture of the 3rd month that we were doing back then, this is the end, this is the beginning of your 7th Sabbath count, there's Sabbath 1. Which means the prophetic timing is what? Remember from Luke chapter 3? He wasn't baptized at his birth, he began to be, which means it was a week after. We showed in the last teaching how it was a week later, which means when we follow this count forward, and this would be the timing of the pre-trib right here, then this would be the timing of the Son of Man beginning his 40 days, coming on the 8th day. So what are we seeing in all this as I end it? We're seeing that we are looking at a time frame between here and here, if you will, that is the exact same thing we were looking at when we were looking from 3rd month, right, from Sivan and counting it through. But then we know that prophetically there's the 2-month gap to when Christ is going to fulfill these things. And when we did the count of the 7 Sabbaths, it actually brings us, remember, like August 12th? This would be our August 12th of 2024 in our Tishri 1 count that brings us into 2025. So this would be like the 8th day of the 5th month. This would be the 9th day of the 5th month. You see? And so either it's going to be here for the pre-trib, or it's connected to here. And either the Son of Man will return for his 8th day here, or return for his 8th day here. Everything is just an exact 180, or an exact flip. Okay? It's going to mirror itself from the exact things we've counted already. And the reason I thought it was very interesting was this triggered me right here. Because when I saw the post in the forum about this, it wasn't the first time that I remembered reading that the 2nd month, 17th day was being told to us as Cheshvan 17. So this is an exact mirror image of this. Our modern 2nd month, 17th day, clearly a historical previous 2nd month, 17th day. So this to me was a clear indication that something had switched. And if we're going to count back as it was back then, which we did from a Taurus count, we're doing the exact same thing here in Kislev being the 3rd month. Tishri, month 1. Cheshvan, month 2. Kislev, month 3. So this would be our Taurus that we've been talking about all this time. And doing the exact same count. So literally a mirror reflection of what we were talking about. And isn't it interesting that in the exact same process count all the way through, the 15th day of the end of the 7th Sabbath count, from the exact same type of count, one brought us to the New Year of Trees, and the other brought us to the great day for weddings. I think that's pretty wild. That's very interesting. And you want to know what it does? Is it gives me no clarity. I know you didn't want to hear that, but it doesn't bring me any clarity. Because when you see it and you understand that it's not something I'm just throwing out there as a possibility, we literally have this and many other things showing us that there was a reversal. But what else do we have? We have the possibility that Christ was born at the time of the winter solstice, and we also have other prophetic insight showing us, and historical documents and the sun, moon, and stars showing us that he may very well have been born at the summer solstice. Do you understand what's happening? It's just simply flipped. We have evidence that it could be from Taurus, from Tishri. And we have evidence that it could be an account from Nisan. Only the count from Nisan and the 7 Sabbaths beginning from here is where there's actual wheat being harvested. But if we're going to go back to the way it was historically, well, then it would have been the opposite. Because then that would mean this was the time when there was winter, and this was the time when it was summer. Ah! So there still is plenty of reason to be hopeful, and tracking this count to this time frame for us right here is, out of everything that I was talking about tonight, this is the latest and still hopeful. I'm not convinced of the Cheshvan 17, because as I showed you, what it represents in a Jubilee count isn't just because that date is there. Sometimes the dates in Scripture are going to be prophetically relevant, but other times they're not relevant in what they're saying prophetically. They're relevant simply in their date, so we can track and count these things in a historical context. But on occasion, there will be specific times that will be very prophetic for us. And I don't believe this is one of them, because as you've just seen in doing this count, it doesn't bring us to anything. And when we've understood this count, it brings us to a literal mirror image of what we counted from summer. Hello. So this being the beginning of the count, that takes us to either here or here, is something to really still be hopeful about, and to be considering that if this time passes, then we can look at it in this time frame as it being the third month, 15th day, though I believe we would have to treat this as Taurus, right, as the third month, 15th day, and do the exact same count as we did for wheat when it would have been ready. That would then take us to either here or take us to here. And when the 50 days is over, it takes us to Nisan as the 7th month, day 1. Hopefully, you guys tracked that. Hopefully, you tracked that there was nothing complicated in it. We looked at a couple of time frames within it, but overall, all we were doing was a mirror image of everything else that we did that brought us to August 12th, 13th, and then the, 19th to 20th. That is all that we have just mirrored. We're not accounting for the moon and the sun or all of those things. We're just simply saying if we go 315 to 315, a Nisan count to a Taurus count, and then begin all of those counts as we know biblically are done. And they both bring us to a significant date. And why? Why? Because we know we are in this range of 70, and we know that the count, that the prophetic, that the Jubilee count is understood. We've understood what it means. We understand what its connection to is with the adding of the 10 days. Where the count comes from. That it must be a 49, then the Jubilee, which is the first of the next 49. If it was on its own, it would mean we've got 40 more years to go. There's nobody here anywhere that follows prophecy that believes we could have 40 more years to go. Which leaves only one option. We must be in that window. But how was that window to be counted? This seems kind of silly, doesn't it? Counting it the way we did. But I didn't make up how to count it. It already existed. Is it really possible that that's the count? It is. It is possible because we're going back to the way it was in the beginning. And if that's possible, then Nisan is Tishri. And if Nisan is Tishri, and you count the 13 to the 14 years, you come to Nisan, which is Tishri, and you would come to the 10th day. Oh, look what they have on the 10th day. Yom Aliyah, right? Immigration to the Jewish state of Israel. In Aliyah. You see how everything is a mirror? The 10th day, which is Yom Kippur in Tishri, and in Nisan, the 10th day, which may prophetically be Tishri, it's called Aliyah. I remember looking at this a while back too. Aliyah, and what is Aliyah? It's the immigration to the Jewish state of Israel. Well, let me finish with this right here. Do you know what happens on the Jubilee when they proclaim it on the 10th day of the 7th month? Shall hallow the 50th year, proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and you shall return every man unto his possession, and you shall return every man unto his family. Wait, what is Aliyah? The immigration back into the land of Israel. What? What? It's a mirror, guys. It is a mirror. What would this be? Oh, wouldn't that be tabernacles? The 7 days of tabernacles to the 8th day, new beginning? Maybe we just hit on something here, brothers and sisters. Oh my goodness. Maybe we've just hit on something. Maybe it's all flipped. And because of that person's post in the forum saying, no, it's Cheshvan, 2nd month, 17th day. Is this possible? Is this possible? Well, we have great hope now, don't we? We have great hope that can tie us into about mid-February. We have places to keep our eyes focused, understanding there's chaos and craziness going on. The inauguration is right here, which would mean if this were the time and the inauguration is right here, if Trump makes it prayerfully, right, God's will, this would begin the first year of Trump's new term, right? Well, I want you to remember that when we get to the next teaching. Brothers and sisters, I pray you have tracked it, you have followed it, you have understood what I was showing. Study it, look it over for yourselves, understand it, and know that we must be close. Whether it's this, whether it's a little earlier, or whether we still have a little more time left in 2025, the time is near at hand. But man, this really just, when it dawned on me, all of these things, the connections, the timings. What if this prophetically is Tishri? Then we would still be in the 70th. I'm going to leave it there for now. Brothers and sisters, I pray it blesses you. I pray it gives you more strength. I pray you remember the ministry for support if you're able. Prayers always for us and for each other, and especially for everything going on in Uganda. It is unbelievably exploding. Hundreds of thousands of people are being reached, all because of our support, our prayers, the books, everything that's going on over there. So brothers and sisters, help if you can. We love you. God bless you. God bless your families always. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.